So the point that probably I should stress is that given this is a global proposition, the standard is global, we thought we should start local. And this is local for us. As I said before, we've been here every year. And so consequently, for part 2, the demonstrator strategy, the use case scenario, we're looking at a London-wide test bed, but it'll be an innovation hub, so it will connect with other cities across the UK and further afield. And so this is very early days. We haven't spoken about it before. We are now. So, Alex, what can I say? We met under very unusual circumstances, but suffice to say, I was playing Cowell, what's his name? Simon Cowell, to Alex's, she was running creating a project that needed to win, was it 3 million in a week? Yeah, we had £3 million literally to give away in 4 days. And I was one of the judges, and I was the Simon Cowell. I was the one telling them to go back and do it again, and they worked through the night. Come on up.
I feel like I may be the wild card person that was invited here. Very nice to meet everybody and to be here. Wherein I met was something called the Long-Term Care Revolution. And I actually don't remember the date, but it was over a decade ago, right? 2013, I don't feel old at all. And it was an Innovate UK project, and it was actually totally different, I think, to any other Innovate UK project that had ever been created. I think that might have had something to do with Ian. But really what the idea was is to get people from all different walks of society with all different experiences and different ideas, and really stick them into a strange hotel environment for a forced period of time and see if we could come up with some kind of novel solutions and novel ways of thinking about how we age better. And so I was very surprised when Ian contacted me recently, or actually contacted me a long time ago, because we've been kind of on and off in touch over that period of time, and told me that finally the standard was born, because I don't think standards and Ian were two things that I had in my head that naturally fit together. I had Ian as the kind of marketing, creative maverick, and standards maybe the stereotype of standards did not fit that view. So it was, I actually think, something that's now done something great for standards, having the likes of Ian and Nick and everybody working on it, but also something that I think is really going to change the future. So back then, long-term care revolution days, the reason I was working in corporate finance at the time, but I was a governor at a special needs school, and I got really kind of passionate. It was the time when the iPhone was starting to kind of become mainstream and make a real difference. And I was like, why does, this technology is so amazing and it helps me buy stuff, but it really isn't helping those that need it the most. So I got kind of really crusading about what technology could do to help older and disabled adults. And I spun out, thanks to some of the funding, but yeah, also some of the ideas that came out of it. Spun out a business called Alcove, made it really difficult for myself, having never done technology before, and did a hardware and software as a service business, used in-home sensors, retrofitted environments, gathered the data, and then sent alerts to caregivers when kind of behaviour wasn't as normal. So it was probably a bit too pioneering for the days, but it's still running now. Also from a kind of marketing perspective, it was very much, and apologies if anybody here works at Tunstall, but at the time there was very much kill the big red button idea, because I just found that sort of putting a big red button around somebody's neck was a kind of demeaning and sort of degrading way of going, right, this is good enough technology for you. You know, the world's changed. Great to see that technology is now making a bigger difference, but there's so much more that we can do. Since then, since Alcove, I've done another couple of health and care technology startups, and now actually I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer at a company called Genomics, which is actually working with Bupa, some of the work that you're talking about, doing in vitro diagnostics, actually giving you kind of preventative information on what's your genetic risk of getting certain conditions. So trying to kind of bring that stage of intervention earlier down the line, so we're not just treating illness and sickness. So the world's changed, right? Technology is changing it. It's absolute, and it's the pace of change is just dramatically accelerating. But I really feel that our neighbourhoods, our housing, our care systems haven't changed. They're not keeping up with that pace of change. You know, there's 1 billion people aged over 60 today. By 2050, that's going to double to 2 billion people. We're talking about the sort of loneliness epidemic. You know, they've now shown that loneliness is equivalent, the health equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. You know, it's real damaging health outcomes. And from a personal perspective, what Nick said earlier, I always joke that a generation ago, I would have been called a barren spinster. But, you know, now I chose not to marry, I chose not to have children. That used to sort of mark someone out as a kind of social failure, right? But today it's a kind of, you know, a massively growing, choice-driven minority. So there's going to be about 30% of people that will be in that sort of category of solo living. It's becoming more and more the norm. What I think about, you know, the ISO standard, what is nice is that it's beginning to see people like me, people that choose to live as solo, that choose to solo live. You know, it talks to individuals as well as kind of couples and small households, and kind of how we're evolving and how household arrangements are evolving. The problems with living alone and being a me, I'm obviously, if you're alone, you're more likely to experience loneliness, and that leads to those health and cognitive, those bad health and cognitive outcomes. Women are more likely to live alone in old age. We're also more likely to be solo carers. My mum is in her late 70s, and she cares for a neighbour who's in her late 80s. No children, I guess by default means I've got no natural care network. No partner means potentially it's a sort of single point of failure. So our neighbourhoods, our design systems have got to compensate for that. It's also a kind of financial crisis. You know, everybody's seen the cost of care, and the government's continually failing to do much about that because effectively it would bankrupt the country. So we know that prevention's really the only affordable future. So I think, you know, the importance of the smart multi-generational neighbourhoods, moving to a prevention model, that predictive preventive support is absolutely critical. I think Ian was talking about, or maybe it was Nick, about the investable asset class. So, you know, there's an opportunity here as well for financial growth. It's quite interesting. I've just come back from Ukraine. I drove a humanitarian aid vehicle to Ukraine as part of a convoy of 29 vehicles. And when we got there, we went to City Hall, and we were talking there about kind of, you know, unfortunately, the kind of boom in certain industries and the boom in the defence industry as the drone technology, which is amazing, but also the other industry that's got a big boom in it is the healthcare industry, is the care technology industry, because there's so many people that have blast damage or amputees that they're developing these kind of neural linked prostheses and exoskeletons and using technology to do that. So it's generating income, but they're also having to adapt their neighborhoods as well. Adapt them. They're saying Lviv now is going to be the most accessible city in the world because there's such a high number of people with missing limbs. And they're adapting to that. I thought that was a really nice sort of accelerated version of what we're trying to do, unfortunately for terrible reasons, but the difference that that's having on people's lives is incredible. So I was trying to think of sort of examples of kind of, what's happened before and sort of and what can happen now. 1929, Clarence Perry created this concept of neighborhoods. The city around people, your schools, your shops, your parks, everything within walking distance from your house, and that's how communities now have lived for nearly a century, minus a few years. So I think now, 2025, this standard, I think it gives us the opportunity to do that again. It gives us an opportunity to do that for an aging society, potentially a more isolated solo living society, but also an AI-enabled society. I'm a technologist, I'm Chief Product and Technology Officer now. I've always been super excited about what technology can do, and wow, this is an exciting time to be alive from a technology perspective. It's sort of mind-boggling how quickly it is all changing. I like the kind of concept that AI becomes the new plumbing. It's a foundational utility. It's like water or electricity. It's not a feature, not a nice to have. It's like becoming a fundamental human right. What does that look like? Always hard to say, but I think some of the more progressive companies and some of the more progressive housing associations and various different organisations are starting to implement some of this stuff now. So things like AI-enabled wearables and sensors. Back to my original business, I was definitely a bit too early. So continuous health monitoring, doing that sort of early warning, interventions before crises, etc. I think the standard referred to it as predictive maintenance for living, although it took me a while to get my head around that statement. But again, I think it's that detecting change early, responding proportionately, like avoiding having to escalate to institutions, moving from analog to digital, from sickness to prevention, to quote the 10-year plan. And then this concept of like cognitive neighborhoods, I loved that. This sort of responsive cognitive piece was very inspiring. Sort of proactive environments, things that sense, things that coordinate and respond. So not that sort of reactive, everybody having to do it. It's not just about having broadband in your building. And then robotics, which is like a little bit further away. I think all that stuff, all the other things that are available now, robotics is a little bit down the line. But I don't know if anybody watched the table tennis video, which is sort of mind-boggling. And some of the stuff I saw at Superhumans in Lviv in Ukraine, I mean, it's, like fully working exoskeletons that are empowering people that had, that were completely motionless to walk is, it's incredible. So that sort of care assistance embedded into neighbourhood life is going to become standard. It's not going to become sort of medical treatment. So now we've got the standard. What next? I know that's kind of what today is about. It's the hard bit now. It's the implementation bit. Which I think is the bit that we're always a bit rubbish at in the UK. We're quite good at innovation and we're not very good at implementation and scale. But it's the implementing bit, the evaluating bit, it's the setting best practice bit. That's the bit that really makes a difference. My only business that didn't work, the one that failed, I set up as a not-for-profit and a social enterprise, and I've sort of kicked myself a little bit about that because I don't think profit and social impact are mutually exclusive, and actually to get things to scale, they need to be financially sustainable. So what does that mean for people in the room? I don't know what the makeup of the people in the room is, but for planners and developers, it's building these smart multi-generational neighborhoods, proving it works at scale as well. Scale is absolutely critical. For the technology and AI companies, people like me, you've got to design that digital plumbing, not for hospitals, but for the neighborhoods. For the health and care providers, it's like, what does neighbourhood-based care talk about? We've got this kind of buzzword, but I think we're still sort of grappling in the UK to understand what that really looks like in practice. For policymakers, we've got to give things like this standard teeth. We've got to fund them, we've got to mandate them, we've got to talk about them. And for everyone in this room, I think we've got to refuse to accept that ageing alone means ageing invisibly, but I think that's a sort of given because you're all here anyway. So we're a self-selecting bunch. So that, going back to Clarence Perry, and 100 years ago, he drew that map for how we live together, and I think we've got the opportunity today to do it again. So Ian, thank you for inviting me here. I feel like the standard's sort of driven the outlines of the new map. So any of us that were never very good at drawing inside the lines now can do the colouring in the middle.